I think you know why we've remained relatively silent as to the normal amount of John Barilaro coverage that we give when he is in Parliament explaining how he got his Trade Commissioner position. And thankfully, a huge reason for that is one, that the press is actually explaining it, and two, that John Barilaro is explaining it pretty well himself. What a day. I think that there was a lot that we could gather from his evidence, and the main one is that he is, to quote himself, the unluckiest man in New South Wales politics. Christ, what a victim complex that man has. There was so much woe is me throughout the entire day. And there was one particular part that I think was rather interesting, which was that John Barilaro told the inquiry that the reason that he had finally decided to step down was after Gladys Berejiklian said that she was going to step down on the 1st of October. That's when he claims he made his final decision that he was going to resign. He is then presented with a document that contradicts that by a country mile. Please enjoy this one section of the hearing that is John Barilaro trying to unscramble an egg.
I just want to take you back, Mr. Barilaro, to that final week. It must have been a frantic week, that week of the 27th of September through to the 1st of October, leading to the events of the 3rd and 4th of October. So really your final week in the job. The 27th of September, that was the Monday, that was the cabinet meeting in which this cabinet submission was considered. That's correct?
From the hearing, that's what I believe. I don't have access to those files.
Yeah, and that was the change. That was when these roles changed to become ministerial appointments. That had, as we've observed elsewhere in the hearing, that hit the cabinet table in relatively record time. I won't ask you to comment on that, but just 7 working days. Friday, the 1st of October, you made that global trade announcement with others in the morning.
Correct.
And then in the afternoon, that was when the Premier Berejiklian resigned. You've told us on the Saturday, the 2nd of October, you spoke to your colleague Minister Stokes about your intentions, perhaps his intentions, certainly your intentions, that's correct?
Correct.
And what did you say to him?
Yeah, so again, you say it was a frantic week. Unless I had a crystal ball or knew the inner workings of the ICAC, at no point did I know that Premier Berejiklian was resigning on the Friday. So the timeline may look frantic, but it was business as usual. A cabinet submission that went to cabinet on the Monday was approved. Whatever happened after that in relation to how frantic the week became, no one would have known. And the reality would have been is that I would have not had resigned that week or on the 4th of October if the events of the Friday the 1st hadn't occurred. So on the Saturday, as I said, I had a missed call from Minister Stokes, as I recall. I returned that call and we spoke about all things, but in my mind, it felt like it was quite public that he was nominating for the leadership of the Liberal Party. I think he was reaching out to the leader of the National Party, a coalition partner. I sense that was part of the conversation. I can't recall. I've got to be honest, I can't recall exactly, but I do remember then going into a conversation around that. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue anyway, and talking through, remembering the events of my break. Part of it was debate around Koala Sepp. Minister Stokes was a part of that. Minister Stokes and I, over the months post that period, became quite honest with each other and I believe built a professional friendship. And so to talk something through with someone that you probably wouldn't normally go to for counsel, it was really good for me, therapeutic in a way, that I was getting the advice of an individual that I respected. I used to say he was the smartest person in cabinet. And I do apologise to those other cabinet ministers.
But
you know, and I think at the time, it might have been by text message or phone call over that weekend, I even spoke to Andrew Constance, and I go, again, people will probably laugh at this, going, what? You seem to, the people that you had public fights with, you seem to have trusted, and I think he made a comment that, you know, that he was was part of my decision to go. And that's when I decided. And I can tell you, Premier Perrottet...
On that Saturday,
he was telling me to stay. Sorry?
On that Saturday, as you had these discussions. Yeah.
On the Saturday and the Sunday, and then I spoke to my team because I had to organise a press conference for Monday morning. I think there was noise coming out of the media Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. Nothing is ever quiet, as Barry Farabee, my third referee.
Sure.
So the reality is, it was over that weekend I decided that the Monday morning I was calling it quits. And, subject to, I had this defamation case. And don't forget, I was also a witness in the ICAC issue with the former Premier. And all of that played on my mind that I just thought now's the time to go.
Yeah, and I'll just come back to that point you just made. The Premier at that point, or the incoming Premier, Premier Perrottet, asked you to stay at that point. You had made your mind up.
Well, yeah, look, when the announcement happened on Friday, just like Minister Stokes, Minister Perrottet had a chat with me about, what the next chapter would look like under his watch if he was to become Premier. I indicated that I'm not sure at this stage, and he was asking me to stay. He wanted stability. He knew the role that I played in the roadmap, but I had to be honest with him. And I believe until it might have been Sunday before I recontacted Dom or Premier Perrottet that I wasn't contested. I believe at that point he thought I was staying.
Yeah, and then your press conference, you made this public, and events unfolded from there, a rapid resignation from the key role, although, as you've said, you've stayed on as MP.
Yeah, well, I stayed on as MP till December only because initially we thought there were going to be by-elections immediately. I think there was talk about October, November by-elections, and that would have been good. It would have been easier. But then, of course, I think, again, the COVID plans sort of disrupted that, and I think the Electoral Commission wasn't comfortable with it, and that dragged out. So I wanted to stay on as a local member and not vacate that seat and not leave that seat. On that Monday,
on the 27th of September, when the Cabinet dealt with this issue, you've said you had the support of others to get it on the agenda. It wasn't all you. The Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, the Treasurer, Dom Perrottet, had ticked off in this leadership meeting to say that this would be on the agenda.
Well, that would have been earlier, a week or 2 weeks earlier when the Cabinet submission was lodged.
Yeah, but you had the support of others to have this discussed. But you'd accept, though, in that Cabinet meeting, you were a key advocate, the key advocate for this proposal.
I'm the portfolio minister that submitted the submission, but with the support of the other two. But in the end, the support of the whole Cabinet bar one.
Yeah. And I think you're saying to us that we should have no concerns that as the key advocate in that meeting, you were yet to decide you were resigning at that point.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
As I said, if the events of Friday didn't occur, I would have stayed on for who knows how long. Delta, the roadmap, all of the above. I had some of my colleagues urging me not to retire and resign because I had said that I wanted to not contest the next election. And then, of course, all those events, and I made it clear on the day I resigned, I just couldn't do it anymore. Emotionally and mentally, couldn't do it anymore. And with all the events that I was confronted with.
So I might just ask the Secretary to give you a document. I might circulate that. So I'll just get you to look at that, and there's a copy for the Secretary. So this is your outline of evidence in your court case.
Yep.
You can see there, I've given you the full copy. I'm just tabling the first and last pages. I might ask you to turn to the last page of that. And can you just read out the highlighted?
Yep. I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics and do not want to face another election.
And what's the date on that, down the bottom?
The 24th of September.
This is the 24th of September. This is your submission of evidence to the court case. You've sworn this is your view. This is before the Cabinet meeting, before the 27th, a week before you say you made this decision. But this is what you've told the court in your defamation case.
Correct.
I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics.
Yeah, at some point. And as I said earlier, my initial timeline was I was going to retire on budget week, but unfortunately Delta struck and I was put into isolation.
So doesn't that mean you're sitting in the Cabinet meeting as the key proponent, the key advocate for this measure to change this to ministerial appointments? You know you've put in your court statement,
Yeah.
you are resigning from politics.
At some point in the term, it says
You know that.
I won't face the next election.
Your colleagues in the cabinet
I won't
don't
face
know
the
that,
next election.
do they?
No, that I wouldn't
Did
be
you
facing.
tell them in that
Point of
cabinet?
order.
No,
Chair.
I'm sorry,
Point of
but I've answered the question that, and it's clear here that I therefore made a decision to retire from politics. I do not want to face another election. So I've made that absolutely clear today that my intention in June was to retire, but I couldn't. Then I was stuck in the role and doing the work, and who knows when that would have happened. It could have been on the eve of pre-selection.
Sitting in that cabinet meeting, you know you're going to retire. You stated clearly
In the future,
and the others don't.
In the future.
But you hadn't made that clear to your colleagues as this was sitting.
I'm clarifying to you that this statement is that at some point before the next election, I would retire. That's what I'm saying.
And I'm putting to you that these two statements, one you've made to the inquiry, that you made that decision on Saturday the 2nd of October, and this statement that you made on the 24th of September, cannot both be true.
They're both true. They're both true. Because, as I said, if the events of October 1 didn't occur, I most likely would have still been in the role for months, even now, who knows, until it was the right time to retire. You're trying to say, and what you're suggesting here is that I knew I was going to retire, therefore I was creating this job for myself. I know where you're going with this, and that is absolute rubbish, which I refute. I completely refute.
This
evidence does not actually back that, does not back that at all, because all it says is I will not face another election. I think that's quite clear.
Well, perhaps your colleagues might have wanted to know. That's important context as you
not at all
advocate to change these roles to ministerial appointments.
Not at all, because when you say it like that, what you're trying to say is that I was advocating to change these roles to benefit me. No, I was changing these roles based on leadership meetings, based on the request of some MPs and ministers, based on the aspiration of the government through Global New South Wales, a document created by Treasury. I'm entitled to answer. I'm entitled to answer the question, so
your colleagues might have wanted to know this.
No, because there was nothing to know. There was nothing to know. Actually, my colleagues publicly knew. A lot of my colleagues.
You were going to resign. Point of order. Might have appreciated being
actually, it was quite public. It was quite public that a lot of my colleagues knew that I was not facing the next election.
Mr. Barilaro,
it was very public.
I've just Mr. Poulos. I've just a point of order has been taken just in terms of allowing the witness a little bit of time to answer the questions.
Look, I know there's a lot of
members
TV
in order.
Here. I know that Mr. John
Mr.
Graham
Fang, I know what you were going to say, and I have just asked the member to allow the witness a little bit more time to respond to the questions.
Thank you, Chair. It was very public that I was at some point going to retire. I actually never hid that. I said it quite frequently in the press that I was struggling with the role. And as I said, it was very possible I could have even left back when I took leave. And the reason why I didn't choose to do that, because that's not what I wanted to be remembered for. I didn't want to be remembered for leaving on mental health grounds. So I worked damn bloody hard to get myself back together with a lot of psychiatric and psychology work. I dealt with some demons, and I actually think it did a wonderful job as a member of the crisis committee and rebuilding the roadmap.
And I accept some of that.
And it's irrelevant and it was quite public that at some point I would leave, and it would have been to no surprise of any member of the cabinet.
Let him answer, John.
Any member of the cabinet that I wasn't hanging around for 2023.
I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics. That's what you've written here.
Well, I've said to you, that in June I made a decision I was going to retire. I've already confirmed that in June I was considering.
I'll take a point of order, Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Mookie's taking a point of order.
I understand that the usual practice is that there's question followed by answer. You were right to perhaps call my colleague, but maybe my colleague should be now allowed to ask the question, and perhaps the witness might wish to just allow the question to be asked and then he can respond.
Yes, fair call. That is the way that we should be doing things, so that the member should be able to also ask the question without interruption. So let's proceed there. Order. Mr. Fang, let's just go with that. That the member can ask the question without being interrupted, and the witness can also respond without being interrupted. That would be wonderful.
The tone was set quite a bit.
Mr. Fang,
Graham set the tone of this, and I think
do you want to? Yep.
Yeah, no, is Mr. Fang dissenting from the ruling?
No, I'm just making the point, Deputy Chair, that...
Point of order? Yes.
Then we've ruled.
Sorry, Mr. Fang. I have said that both the member and witness, if they could just allow each other to speak a little bit without interrupting, that would help proceedings greatly, not to mention our poor Hansard reporters who really struggle when two people speak over each other. So, Mr. Graham, will go with you. At this stage, the crossbench don't have any questions, so you've got the next 20 minutes.
Mr. Barilaro, this document is dated the 24th of September 2021. When did you sign it, or when did you authorise it to be issued?
It would have been on that day.
On that day.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a question over whether it was delivered on that day or otherwise to the 1st of October.
I can't answer that.
You can't shed any light on that?
No, I can't answer that. But as I indicated earlier, I even made a decision back in June. What I was enduring with the online abuse, the trolling, the issues that, of course, at the heart of my defamation case, I decided at that point I could not face the next election, and therefore I would resign or retire at some point. And that never left me. But I couldn't do it in June, and there was no plan initially to do it in October, but an opportunity arose because of the events of 1 October with the resignation of the Premier of New South Wales. It gave me an opportunity, and some have criticised me that I left that role when we needed stability, but it gave me the opportunity for a refresh of the government, and that is why, after conversations with some personal friends and, of course, Minister Stokes and others, I made a decision
you
to go there.
Some of your colleagues around that cabinet table, as these roles changed, would not have known that you had made a decision.
No, I disagree. I think a lot of my colleagues knew, because I was quite public throughout my term, that I was not facing the next election. I think that was obvious. Secondly, it is irrelevant to that debate, because this wasn't about a cabinet submission for me.
Mr. Barilaro, I just only have a few follow-up questions arising from the two lines of questioning that my colleague has asked you about.
Yes.
First, just in respect to this particular statement that I think we've established you provided the court, was it the Supreme Court, New South Wales Supreme Court?
Federal Court.
Federal Court, on the 24th September 2021. I think my colleague took you to the first two sentences, which you read out. But the third sentence does say this, and to be fair, it supports what you just said. Although I have previously contemplated resigning, the respondent's conduct has played an instrumental role in my decision. That's abundantly clear to all. But when you read the first in conjunction with the second, an ordinary reader may well conclude that at that point on the 24th of September 2021, you reached a point of definite decision as opposed to future decision. Now, I'm going to ask you to respond, because to be fair to you, Mr. Barilaro, you've told us just then that you said, I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics at some point, is what you said to us. But to be fair, that's not what you said here. It says, what I've said you said, I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics, not at some point. And
I do not want to face another election.
Yeah, I accept that. I do accept that, Mr. Barilaro. What I'm asking you to respond to is that you make the point that you've previously contemplated resigning, and the respondent's conduct made the instrumental role.
Absolutely.
And that's not clearly, that's abundantly clear to all, that that's what's happened. But the issue is again, shouldn't you have not perhaps said or clarified this to the court? Because otherwise you are leaving the impression that what you've told us today is at least more complete an answer than you provided the court on 24 September 2021.
Not at all. This is reflective of the time and how I was feeling and how I felt. And this is absolutely in line with what I said in the court. Today I've been able to give you a fuller answer in relation, and an honest answer, that I even said that the pressures that I was going through, the struggles and the attacks, and you are aware, because it's quite public, it wasn't just online, there was threats when I used to go to a local pub, etc. So the reality here is that I originally wanted to leave in June, but because of Delta, that didn't occur. That didn't take away that I made a decision I would not face the next election. Now, you want to get caught up on the words. I'm giving you today exactly what went through my head at that time, and it's in line with what I said on the day that I retired.
Barilaro, the other point you made in respect to the questioning asked by my colleagues, you said that you brought the submission after you were requested to do so by ministers and MPs.
Not requested, but as I said,
That was the word you used.
Well, no, I said that in discussions with MPs and ministers, they raised the issue around the escalation, and then at a leadership meeting, which includes the Premier, the Treasurer and myself, I raised the issue, and therefore concluded from that meeting that I would bring a cabinet submission.
Yes, but we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
Rest assured. But you did make the point that you had the support of the full cabinet, bar one.
Yep, on the day. Yes.
Who was the one?
That's a cabinet decision, and I don't think I'm bound not to.
Fair enough, but you're telling me that the entirety of the cabinet, with the exception of one member, supported your submission to turn these into ministerial appointments.
Yeah, well, what I will say this is cabinets don't vote on anything. People speak for and against. It was actually quite a vocal debate in support of, but one minister had reservations about why we would do it, but it didn't mean he didn't vote for it, because we don't vote, and therefore the cabinet...
Solidarity.
Sorry?
Cabinet solidarity.
That's right, and therefore the decision of the cabinet stands that it was supported.
Thank you.
Mr. Barilaro, you had publicly said on quite a few occasions that you were considering not running. You said when you initially stood, you said you were only going to stand for 2 terms.
Yep.
You know, this is something that you kind of discussed publicly a lot, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're aware of it because you were the duty manager down in the Monero. So
your colleagues may have been aware of this kind of general discussion in the media that you were you'd been toing and froing a bit. Like you say, you'd made a decision or you thought you'd made a decision in June, but you'd come back from that decision. Is that correct?
Look, there is no question in my mind that my colleagues, ministerial and MPs in this government, in the coalition government, were aware post my break that I was leaving. I think I can hand on heart say that for many of them, they knew I was not facing 2023.
Yeah, but that's a very different... That's a very different thing, though. General discussions about when you're going to leave, as opposed to putting your name on a signed court document that says, I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics.
But I have.
The implication from this, from anyone's reading of this, Mr. Barilaro, you would understand is that it was imminent. Would you appreciate that?
It wasn't imminent. You want to assume that, and that's the suggestion and the accusation you're trying to make because it works for your timeline. But no, because it was clear that it said, and you keep pulling away from this part, I do not want to face the next election. The next election is in March 2023. So that gives you a very big window. At some point in that timeline, I would retire from politics.
But you didn't include that in your statement. Why didn't you include that, Mr. Barilaro?
Because I didn't need to, because this captured exactly what I felt and what I believed in and why I resigned. And the events of October 1 galvanised, at that point, an opportunity for me to resign.
But do you understand, Mr. Barilaro, that you might be arguing the semantics? We've got a signed...
You're the one who actually stuck in the semantics.
We've got a signed statement here from you submitted to a court. It's a very serious document that says, I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics.
Before the next election. Can you read the whole statement?
I do not want to face another election, although I've previously contemplated the respondent's conduct has played an instrumental role in my decision.
Absolutely.
The implication from that, Mr. Barilaro, is that is imminent.
No, it's not.
Mr. Barilaro, did you ever convey this new decision to your colleagues as you were discussing to transform the stick appointments to ministerial appointments?
Well, firstly, I refute your statement. I refute the accusation or suggestion you are making in relation to what was behind my statement to the courts, which I stand by. That's the first part. The second part is it is absolutely irrelevant to my colleagues in relation to what I was going to do when and where in relation to retirement on a cabinet submission that was in relation to a broad government policy that I had no intention at that point of applying for or being part of. The accusation you are making is I created the stick role for myself, and therefore I should have informed my colleagues that I was going to resign at some point in the future, and somehow this job would be for me.
Isn't it up to them to judge whether it's relevant or not? Isn't that really their judgment?
It's not relevant.
Sounds like there's more to come out on Friday. Guess you're going to have to stay tuned for that, folks. See you next time.